to your stomach, and it's like a very watery medium in there. There's some fire, it's like we're cooking it on the campfire. It's like churning around, and then there's a churning action. And then you get the food becomes a juice.
Hey everyone, it's Cate Stillman with the Thrive with Cate podcast, and I'm here with Kate O'Donnell, return episode, and her site is healwithcate.org. And we were just trying to figure out maybe the first time we had one of these conversations, and we think it was on the release of her Everyday Ayurveda cookbook, which is celebrating its 10-year anniversary and re-release. So absolutely amazing. Kate, congratulations on having an amazingly popular book on Amazon and helping people learn how to cook or learn how to cook maybe in a way that's healing for their bodies.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. I know it's been 10 years.
10 years.
Yeah.
So what surprised you? I'm just kind of curious, like what surprised you about this, about your whole reflection back on Everyday Ayurveda cookbook?
I mean, one of the things I look back on is how hard I worked on that book,
Yeah.
how hard I worked in general at that stage of life, how
Yeah.
I would never, I don't think I would approach a project that way anymore. So
Yeah.
yeah. And it was like, I look back on that, it was so inspired too. It was before the wave of new publications in Ayurveda. They really all came out around that year, 2015. And it was just so exciting to create a resource that I knew we didn't have.
Yeah.
So yeah, as I look at it now, we wanted to do the 10th anniversary edition in order to kind of keep the book current because it's still amazing.
Yeah.
So I sort of wrote to that in the new forward, and then Amadea Morningstar, who you introduced me to her. I had known
Really?
her books, but as a
Yeah.
person, yeah, I think you
Yeah.
hosted a podcast with the three of us.
Oh my gosh. Totally.
Yeah, yeah. And then she kind of got on my radar more. I mean, I grew up like reading her book,
Right? Because she
Ayurvedic.
had the book.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So it's really cool because she who had the book wrote the forward for the what is now the book.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's
And her books had like just the difference in what your book brought into the world for us Westerners learning Ayurveda and food and cooking, right? Was like color and photos and
right.
eye candy or food
Yeah.
porn in the Ayurvedic sense. Whereas hers was like these text, right? It was just like all text and like
Yeah.
we were in it. Those of us who are serious about learning Ayurveda and cooking,
Oh yeah.
it was our
That
Bible.
was yeah, that was fine. It was on that paper. It looked like unbleached toilet paper,
Totally.
kind of brown.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. That was, I mean, the thing that got me to write the book was how many of my clients were telling me that they didn't use their cookbooks
Yeah.
because they didn't know what their dosha was. So that was
Oh,
the thing that ultimately put the fire under my ass because I was like,
decode
this,
it.
yeah, this is so dumb, like that is not a reason to not, live this lifestyle.
So for people who have never heard of Ayurveda and body typing or Prakriti or but that whole idea of Vata Pitta Kapha, like do you want to just talk a little bit about how you bring people into this book who haven't heard of that and how learning a little bit more about their body type might be advantageous to food preparation?
Yeah, I think the first thing I talk about when I start with a new group is why digestion is so important in Ayurveda.
Mm.
Like why we talk about food and what we eat and what time of day we're eating what. And, we have all of these utilities around food. So I start there by saying, Ayurveda tells us that any imbalance or disease process in your body begins with your digestive tract, which I kind of think Western science is actually starting to come to a similar conclusion right now. But I'll start there, and that's why we talk about food. It's ultimately for your health, and the prevention of disease, right? It's not just because food is fun or whatever, so the cool thing about it is that we look at foods and the body as composed of the same stuff, the same prakriti. There's that word again, right? So the mother nature is composed of the five elements, and that's what makes up your carrot and your rice and your car and your body. So everything that exists in the tangible universe is earth, water, fire, air, space. And so the idea is that we begin to know the attributes of those elements, like water is moist, air is dry and mobile, obviously fire is hot, these very commonsensical kind of sensations that we can own and feel in our own body. And then when you eat a food, you're like, oh, is this moist or is this dry? And then you start to look at your body through that lens. And your constitution is really just like a code for the elements that are present in your body. Yeah. So you're a dry, I might be drier than you. You might be more fiery than me, just because of our DNA.
Yeah.
And then, if you're feeling overly fiery, you have excess signs of heat in your digestion, like acid stomach or loose, acrid stool to be glamorous. If you have something like that happening, right, in the Ayurvedic world, you'll choose something that does not contain fire element, but something that balances fire element, something that's moist, something that's dense, right? And so we like constantly are integrating food with how we feel in our bodies. And if your constitution is a fixed state, that's why we're all like built differently and our bodies all have their certain unique tendencies. So you're knowing what your constitution is just helps you know the tendencies that your body usually leans. It's like understanding your weaknesses and your strengths. If you're like a super fiery type, then like go get them, kid. It's like it's baked into who you are. So those things I just feel like they're so easy to understand and wrap your head around. And then you're in this dialogue with your health and your food. And it's all just based on the attributes that are present in your food and in your body.
It's like pointing out the obvious, right? Where part of the reason the obvious is less obvious is modern culture's gotten so far from nature, right? So our food's so ultra processed, non-local, factory farming, factory produced, right? Where we have these levels of disconnect where things that were just completely obvious are now like we just have to be reminded, but then we see it, right? And the more people see it, the more they can then steer to how they want to feel.
Yeah, and I think that the ramifications also of that kind of connection with the world around us also has benefits for mental wellness, also your digestion, right? I mean, your gut is like it's like the field of all of the microorganisms that live there. They are nature, and they don't want weird crap going on in your diet either. So it's like a symbiosis with all the organisms in your body, all the organisms on your food and on the planet and the celestial bodies. We could bring the astrology into it, and it's this way of being in the flow of life, capital L. That I think just you end up feeling just more like you're here doing what you're supposed to be doing when you're living that kind of lifestyle.
So that's something we notice a lot in Club Thrive is like the sort of like food, what to eat, addiction, obsession, chronic issue, right? Like that just goes away. It just starts to go away. And so like the percentage of time people are thinking about food or even dealing with the whole feeding themselves cycle gets really condensed and more potent, higher nutrient density, right? Better digestion, less food waste, like all those things seem to sync together and like click in together. So maybe we could unpack a little bit about like why that happens and why when often people are starting their healing journey, whether it's with Ayurvedic awareness or without Ayurvedic awareness, like there's a sense of they're eating against themselves. They're feeding themselves against like what would actually optimize their physiology. And there's all these like crutches and props that we're using food, whether it's like quality, quantity, or the specifics of what we're craving in a way that's actually feeding the imbalance. And like the more, when I was writing Uninflamed, what I really got clear on was that like both dysbiosis in the gut, which is organisms that are in small populations totally fine, but in large populations start to block the flow of oxygen from the digestive tract, like into the gut. Like it's just like it's anti-aerobic, right? And so you have less uh, just natural. You basically start to form these like organelles on top of the endothelium, right? With these microorganisms that stop allowing or perforate the membrane. So it's like either hyperallow or stop allow, maybe don't allow oxygen and then perforate, right? And then we see that in every level of microbiome. So in the mouth and the sinuses on the skin, like there's this repeated pattern. And then with continued abuse comes fibrosis, where the tissue becomes totally dysfunctional and hardened, like bone. It just basically starts to become necrotic. Right. And so it's like, what degree of, so, okay, that's the gut. Now I want to talk a little bit about the fat tissue, because in the adipose tissue, we have endocrine disrupting chemicals, just as modern humans. And so if we're not fasting long enough, then our fat tissue is pushing inflammation, like pro-inflammatory markers, actually into the bloodstream, like just part of everyday living, right? Where the fat tissue is generating inflammation in the bloodstream that is then going to affect, again, the dysbiotic microbes in the gut are going to affect our cravings. So the more dysbiosis we have and the more endocrine disrupting chemicals we have in our fat tissue, we will literally crave all the things that are horrible for us.
Right.
And that's
Right.
really, so like learning everyday Ayurveda cookbook, which has a lot on seasonal eating and how to make detoxifying foods, like et cetera, becomes so important, especially when we have cravings that are working against us and we're creating this whole internal war and internal dialogue. So I just love to hear about,
Mm-hmm.
because you've helped so many people with this cookbook kind of navigate different aspects of this journey.
Yeah, there's the Pradnya Parad, right? The crimes against intellect. So it's when that, our intelligence, the innate intelligence of the organism, and of the soul knows what is good for this body, but we do the other thing. So I think there's a mental, the text describe a mental malfunction there, and I
Mm.
think that's a part of the story. And I do think that when the microorganisms, I was just talking about this morning with a friend who has parasites. She's like in this process, of trying to get rid of these parasites. And
Is
she's
she in
like,
India, or is she?
that's where she got them.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. She's back now, but it's been like going on for months. And yeah, I've so been there. I've so been there. But when the microorganisms are not correct, like when their little party is not in its correct formation, it does make you crave things that they want, and
Yeah.
Ayurveda texts describe that. They say that, when you have like a faulty principle in your physiology, which is called a dosha, when you have that faulty principle off kilter, that it will cause perverted cravings. Right? That's like the translation. So the cravings, they go against the grain, or against the natural. So that's described, thousands of years ago. And I think I love that, because I think so many of us get we close ourselves in this tiny box with our own pathologies,
Mhm.
especially around food. There's a lot of shame, people feel about like that they should be healthy,
Yeah.
and they eat this thing and that makes them bad. And a lot of those stories, I feel like we've got this like two-pronged thing. One is the microorganisms themselves and the actual cravings of the body being natural or unnatural. But then we also have the sort of the mental malfunction or the mental pathology that we bring to the table. So,
Mm.
if somebody wants to eat the muffin, there's so much around the muffin that is not about the muffin. That the person's, has all these, like, I think that's a big part. I get this from your work, Kate, like kind of cut the crap, and like let's really look at it with a scientific mind at what creates health in the body and what creates disease in the body.
Yeah, so this is really okay. So myself personally, and then having this, the citizen data from my group, like what I've seen so much, and there's so much, I don't know, there's so much controversy around women and fasting right now, but I have seen like second to none autophagy destroyed dysbiosis. Like, and to me, that's, it's all over in Ayurveda and yoga as well. It's like you can fast out the endocrine disrupting chemicals from the fat tissue. You can fast out the dysbiosis and the microbiome because it's the eubiotic microbes that thrive in a fasted environment. And it's the dysbiotic microbes that thrive in a gunky, gooey, dosha vitiated, whether it's vata in the colon or pitta in the small intestine or kapha in the stomach. Those are all feeding different dysbiotic microbial communities, right? And so it's like the dysbiosis are causing the personality, are causing the cravings, are causing the mind, are causing the choices. And then there's the part of the self that's like trying to get above it. And so one of the things that I found, I used to call it, and I'm not a fan of Mao Zedong's politics, but his whole thing of like great leap forward versus Kaizen. So great leap forward is where you're just going to just do an overhaul. And Kaizen is trying to resist the muffin day after day.
Mm.
Right? But not really changing enough other things that are destroying that which is causing the craving for the muffin.
Right.
And that's where I've landed is like, wow, if I can just, especially if people have AMA or undigested, poorly digested stuff. And how do you describe AMA now? Let's hear it from Cate O'Donnell.
I mean, I just say it's poorly digested food stuff in the stomach. So you ate like too many times, too many days, over the course of a year. It doesn't happen overnight, and then it kind of sits in your gut. It's just poorly digested foods, but it then becomes a toxic substance. The goop, you know, becomes a toxic substance that can then range around and lodge in tissues in the body.
Yeah, so let's talk about like this whole idea of like excess quantity, poorly formed tissue and what that feels like and looks like.
Yeah. With it, like I like to tell the story of digestion, like how the food goes in your mouth, it goes into your stomach, and it's like a very watery medium in there. There's some fire, it's like we're cooking it on the campfire. It's like churning around, and then there's a churning action. And then you get the food becomes a juice. It's turned into a fine liquid. And then the trap door opens down into the small intestine. And the liver enzymes come in and everything starts to go through a more chemical breakdown, where the actual little constituents that your body can take up, that your tissues can take up, they get sort of divided out into their individual cells. And then that moves through the capillaries in the small intestine out into the body, into the bloodstream. So the juice that we start with is the most important factor here. The ahara rasa, the juice of the food, because rasa is the liquid nutrient precursor that from those capillaries in the small intestine goes and washes through all the tissues in the body. So it's like we use water as the universal solvent, right? So, I'm going to clean my underwear in this bucket full of dirty water. Right. So like that rasa that's circulating, that is where the muscles are getting, the fat tissue, the muscles, the nerves, the reproductive tissue, where they're getting their nutrient parts from the juice. And it's called the law of irrigation. Like it literally is irrigating, irrigating the cells and moving through the body. So when we have poorly digested food because of some situation in the stomach, whether it was too much food was had or some food was eaten and then more came in before that was digested, right? And so then you get sort of this half cooked, half uncooked thing that passes through. Or there can be toxins in our food, or there's part aspects to processed foods that aren't recognized as food. So they kind of pass through in the liquid, right? So all that stuff is literally washing through all the tissues in the body. And so a tissue might have a hard time recognizing or finding what it needs. And then we'll start to see like a deficiency in that tissue, which could be the whole body, because the rasa really does irrigate all the tissue layers. But we could start to see, someone start to look sallow, or, they're going to the gym, but they're not able to build muscle. Or we get poor quality tissue, which is just as bad, just as bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, just as bad of a problem, where the body's like, all the tissues are like, well, I need something, so they're absorbing in, and adipose tissue loves to do that the most. Its function in the body is to hold and to protect, and so that's where, like you're saying, a lot of the disrupting chemicals are lodging. And so Ayurveda talks about this sort of like irrigation of nutrition happening through the body, how when things go wrong in the very stomach itself, we start to get the conditions for ama, for that toxic substance. And that when that moves into circulation in the body, it can be very uncomfortable, painful, can cause all sorts of skin problems, joint pain, so many of the things I think a lot of people are experiencing. And then the next step is, if we can't kind of clean it out of the bloodstream, which is I think a lot of what you and your people are doing, right? Is trying to like clear that out of the rasa. And if you don't, then the toxins lodge. They lodge in the tissues. And that's what panchakarma is for. That's like the next layer of cleansing or dredging, where you have to actually break down a tissue by not eating much for many days. You really have to like reduce in order to get whatever is in there out. And then you rebuild the body, which takes a few months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would say the issue, the largest global issue with this right now is excess quantity of food and excess quantity of, we'll even just say like calories,
Yeah.
and poor nutrient density, creating embedded ama, which most people have. Like if you have extra weight for a long time and you have cravings, like that's what we're talking about. Like it's just embedded in the tissue, it's embedded in the fat tissue, and it's embedded in the chemicals in the fat tissue. It's embedded in the microbiome. It's creating that microbial population which can survive in that environment. Right. So different microbes that cause you to thrive in an environment where there's more fasting, because the preferences then. So we use my like dirty shortcut. It's not very dirty, but that sounds kind of fun. It makes it sound more fun than it is.
Yeah. It makes it sound like very secret.
So like every quarter in Club Thrive, it's like, but anyone who has embedded ama still, to me, it's non-negotiable. And then some group, I think it'll happen more in a few months, is like this either monthly FMD or monthly 72-hour water fast, where certain people that have had enough, like just enough kapha in their constitution, have more density in their constitution, have had embedded ama for like enough decades, and they're just like, I want to see what it's like on the other side. So for me personally, when I got on the other side of ama, I was shocked at how like food cravings go away. Like the desire to overeat just entirely goes away. The conversation about should I have the muffin or not, like you don't even want the muffin. The desire to choose nutrient dense foods, like it goes away, because the body just wants fasting and nutrient dense foods, and occasionally like some party food, like some occasional of that, but then it's like, oh gosh, not too much. And it's not the mind's not wrapped up in the decision. It's just the body feeding the body without this whole drama.
Right. The body is having cravings that are of nature, not the perverted ones, right? But the ones that are where the organism itself knows what's best for itself.
And I think okay, so this is my desire. It's like, we're the ones writing Ayurveda now, right? Like you and I are both in middle age, right? And we've seen our elders, right? We talked about Amadea. That was awesome. We could mention a number of others, Maya and Robert, and people that we came up a bit under. I and then it's like, what if, because I noticed there's a lot of disconnect between microbiome language, fasting language, and Ayurveda language. So say we take perverted cravings, which is Ayurvedic. Wait, what if we just say those are the cravings of dysbiosis? Because it's more accurate.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then we're thinking like, oh, it's just my gut microbiome is made up of that which is causing these cravings. So now I know, now I'm back in my gut using a word that more people are using, like gut health or gut microbiome, and being like, okay, I'm going to repopulate this. So let's say like, okay, fasting's part of that, or having, whether it's intermittent fasting, fast mimicking diets, like there's some part that is really, really helpful. Panchakarma, right? Same deal. We're reducing caloric intake into a fast mimicking diet type scenario where we're at 30 to 50% of normal caloric intake. So the body's going to start to digest itself. So we take care of that. Now let's talk about what we are eating. Because now we can get into the cookbook and the recipes and understanding how do we make foods that we can be in like a semi-fasted state or in a state where we know we're reducing so that we can digest ama.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the spices are so huge. This is where the spices are that which digests ama. So there's this whole like classification for so many spices, which is that one of their actions is to digest ama. So they go in and help sort of break down like pow, bam, shazam, they go around in there and break up, sticky spots and break up sticky aspects of your food, right? So that's, I think, one of the best wisdoms of this cooking is everything becomes medicinal with the spices, so you can.
My teenager got hooked right before she left Mexico yesterday. She's going to this local cafe and they have the turmeric, ginger, cayenne, lemon juice shot. She's Kapha, right? And it's a fairly
Perfect. Yeah, yeah.
She's just like, I don't know what it is.
But I love that. Yep. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've had so many changes in my cravings since moving to a more cupogenic place. Like moving to the coast of Maine has totally changed.
Oh, right, from Boston, because you were in the
Yeah.
city.
Yeah, it's in the city. Yep. And it's amazing how different it is, like what I crave.
Tell people what that is. Like, what did that actually look like?
Well, it used to be a lot more like sugar, sweets, coffee, and I had a sweet tooth for many, many years. Um, that would, it was one of those things where I was always like, I'm gonna stop eating sugar, and it was like 3 weeks go by and then I'm eating the sugar again. And any kind of sugar, it was like I needed it. And I think at that time I didn't really know yet how to make like whole meals that were enough food. I feel like a big job that I do with the food is try to help us find good quality foods today. Like where can we find the good wheat? Are there dairy products that are good? Or what's in your environment? What can you find? And so when I moved up to Maine, there's totally different laws actually about raw dairy. So there's a lot. Yeah, you can like the milk scene up there is amazing. And the homemade
You're in farm
cheeses.
country. You're in a
Yeah, yeah, yep, and goats. So it was like I moved more towards savory stuff and I just started like craving savory, like a meal, like a sandwich.
It's interesting that you mentioned milk first too, just with the calming of the nervous system and the fat, like, right? Because it's like good
Yeah.
fat
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
sugar.
Right. No, like it's like my myelin sheath, loves milk. and milk products. And I'm Vata, I only get more like that as the years go by. So I'm kind of at a stage in my life now where I'm like, are we getting enough food?
Yeah.
It's the body wants to reduce more and more the older I get. So I'm like on a mission to, make sure that there's like enough grounding food happens. I still don't eat much meat. I still only like maybe once a month. I'm like real, but this is one of the things also about moving north was it got a lot harder to not eat meat, cheese, dairy, butter, like all those things got a lot harder. And our winter's longer, it's like 3 more months of cold. And
Mm.
so it's like I'm in the land of savory. And my metabolism however, is better than ever.
Mm. So
You know,
describe what that means for people that are like, what would that feel like? What does she mean by that?
I mean, for me, when my metabolism is good, it's like I'm getting hungry, I'm eating to satisfaction, and then I feel like the food digested great. And I'm
Mhm.
like, the amount of tissue and the ratio of tissues on my body is consistent. So it's not like, any part of me is like shrinking or I don't feel like I have like a spare tire pattern
Yeah.
of weight gain, like that. When my metabolism is not great, I will start to feel like flabby around my middle.
Yeah.
Very quickly that will start to happen. And I'll be like, ooh, like yeah, digestion's off. So it's
Yeah.
like the body starts depositing. I mean, maybe it's just water. I don't think it's even adipose, but like the first sign for me now is that my middle starts to like look and feel different, squishier. And then I'm like, ooh, I'm not breaking down my food. Like stuff's being deposited around, you know. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting to think about that in terms of the subtle, like this in Ayurveda and yoga, as many of you know, it's like this understanding of disease moving from subtle to gross. So that that feeling sense is what's first, right? The feeling sense is like I feel boggy or I feel like I'm actually thinking about it, A, which means I'm not thinking about what it would be like if that wasn't there, like whatever is
Yeah.
more important than this, because now the body's capturing my. And that's kind of where I was going with like those food cravings. It's like how much is the body trying to capture awareness because its needs aren't being met?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's like a cry for help.
Cry for help.
Yeah. It's funny though, Kate. It was not funny, it's totally obvious, but when I get that feeling about my metabolism's not great, what's my first line of defense? Fasting.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
what
yeah.
I do. I'm just like, we're just okay, we're gonna not for me, I don't do great not eating anything. But
Yeah,
I'll just eat, like I'll do calorie restriction, as you say, or I'll just eat much less and less often, and I'll go long stretches without food,
yeah,
like hours and hours. And I know for myself, I've learned like what that edge is of my nervous system with fasting,
yeah,
where I'm going to go over the edge and not be able to come back easily. I'll
yeah,
get tweaked. So now I know when that's coming. I'm like, okay, now we're going to eat,
yeah,
but I'll just eat, less and less amounts, larger intervals in between for, whatever, couple days maybe.
yeah,
And, and I feel like as long as I'm awake and I'm doing that, I maintain health pretty well these days,
yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's huge. And we did this episode, it was this group episode last month on called the Death Midwife, and we talked about just issues around voluntary death. And what came up in my research before that episode was voluntary stopping of eating and drinking.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's like the number one way humans historically have controlled dying, their own death. But if we come to that with no practice, right?
Right.
Then we're sort of at the mercy of whatever healthcare system and whatever the laws of our governing agencies are around how we die. And that's what really came up because my community is so into fasting and fasting rhythm. Like fasting rhythm solves most dysbiosis, like fasting rhythm solves most things and it tunes us into desire, right? So tejas or our discrimination around what we really, really, really want, which is
Mm-hmm.
synonymous with hunger. What do you hunger for? Right? All of that
Mm-hmm.
returns. And then in the process, we're actually walking through the journey of these mini deaths. And often when people are in detox, they experience the death of an identity where they're like, I'm not that person anymore. I'm becoming this person next. And so we get used to that birth and renewal cycle. So let's talk about because I'm with you. I actually, even though I'm Pitta Coffin, should be able, some part of me thinks I should be able to just do water fasting. I don't. I love calorie restriction. I love fast mimicking diet. I do it quarterly. I've done it quarterly for, I think I'm going on 5 years now. Made a huge difference in all the things we've talked about. And so for people that are like, what would I eat in a way that I'll feel like nourished until that becomes intuitive, right? Because at some point it becomes completely intuitive. And I think because I've been at this so long, I get really frustrated with being like, it's fucking intuitive. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
Dysbiosis.
yeah.
So it's not intuitive. It's like the dysbiosis is intuitive. So
Right.
walk people through some of your cookbook favorite recipes when they're going to buy the cookbook, and then what should they start doing right away,
Yeah.
especially if they're in Club Thrive with us doing fast mimicking diet.
I mean, this time of year, I'm talking a lot about the green soup. I think what's special
Mm.
about Ayurveda is soup. It's like a great fat kind of fasting food is soup, something that's been pureed, let's say, so there's less chunks to digest. The thing goes in very smooth. We might do like, think about a soup as you can make it heartier or more broth-like. So dependent on the transparency of the soup. So I have soups that have like an almond milk base,
Mm.
or a soup that has like a bone broth base or a veggie broth base, and that like you can the sky's the limit with the soups, with the veggie soups. I feel like that's a really nice food that will bring a lot of, as you say, nutrient dense stuff
Mm.
into the body, like vegetables. Those are like a lot of the minerals, the vitamins, like the more minute things, that the body's looking for. So I'll do like, my green soup is kale and green beans, and parsley is the secret ingredient. And then it's got turmeric and ginger. So you turn anything into the digestive, by adding turmeric, ginger, cumin, potentially coriander. That's a great one for supporting that liver function, sort of later stage of digestion. So I'll kind of put that in everything like a spice mix, I'll just make the seasonal spice mix and like put it in, the blender with some sort of warm broth or milk and parboiled vegetables, and I mean, that parsley though, this time of year is it tastes amazing, but it's like super cleansing, it's got that like bitter taste. So we want more bitters, in the springtime. And when you're trying to cleanse the body, more bitter stuff and more astringent stuff. And it's in the skins of the fruits and vegetables. It's in the flesh of a lot of the vegetables. So I feel like that's easy. That's an easy start. It's like, then once we start adding in more carbs and proteins, especially proteins and fats, that's when we can choose to kind of slow down the cleansing reaction, right? And like get a little more of something. So I might have like a broth-based soup, and then I start to feel like tweaked out. So I'll move into a soup that's got like a milk base,
Mhm.
or I'll add a legume if I want like a protein that's drier, more astringent. So I'm really in the habit of like boiling on the pot. I'll boil a pot of some sort of easy to digest legume in the morning with just water. So I'll do, like a half a cup of red lentils and a cup of water. And I'll just kind of simmer that until they're cooked, which is like half an hour. And then I have that there. And that's like my little protein jam that's
Yeah,
going.
totally. You're
Yeah.
like, I
And
got my
then
source.
yeah. And then like I'll just like boil some broth in a pan, throw in whatever vegetables are present, and then all that can go in the blender with the lentils. And I can use a little ghee. I mean, you can totally like, choose the fats you want to use, or if at all. And it's
Mhm.
just like, there you are making soups. And it's so much better for digesting and breaking down things that are deep in the body to have warm things.
Yeah.
This is where it's different than a lot of the juice fasting and stuff like that. So because the digestive tract inside is warm, if we put food that's warm in there, everything is just going to be easier, be easier. And if you think about anytime you're trying to like say wash a dirty dish, you're going to use hot water, not cold water, right? To pull sticky stuff off of a tissue, so or a plate. So it's warm, soupy stuff. I feel like that's my jam. I might even just, eat soup for a day. Or I love this. My Ayurvedic physician, he's a total cuppa type. He's a little overweight, he loves all of his treats and his foods and stuff. And he'll be like, well, anytime I feel, like I have I fast. I do fasting. I skip a dinner. Like,
Yes.
so for him,
Yeah.
fasting is skipping dinner.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah.
Well, I want to mention to that, like so I'm down in Mexico and we've done a lot of events down here. And one of the waiters across the street where I do my events has always had that sort of, pregnant man look. And I came down a couple weeks ago and I was like, Manuel, like, okay, pasa, like, what is going, like, where did it go? He's down 40 pounds.
Wow.
And he says, no cena, no dinner. I'm
That's
like,
it, right? That's Dr. Douillard's thing. No dinner.
no
Yeah,
dinner.
I
And
know.
how, right? And it's so much, I feel like, with people that are struggling with fasting rhythm are often trying to get themselves to be an evening eater for the convenience of the people around them rather than
Yep.
just going with the no cena route. Yeah, and it's something that I feel like there's not enough. There's not, I mean, there's some research on it that does show that it's much more optimal to fast later in the day than skip, in the middle. Obviously, kaphas who wake up heavy, they wake up with more goo in their with more, whatever mucus in their stomach. They like to be morning fasters. But it seems like the vata pitta types get mixed up in that, and then they're trying to push themselves
Yeah.
beyond
Yeah.
rather than just enjoying a little bit of calorie restriction, eating earlier in the day, and then filling themselves up with like a walk at sunset or a bath or a sauna or whatever.
Right. Yeah, I like how you say like filling yourself. You're right. So we look for nourishment also from things, not only food, but other things as well. Yeah.
Well, I love the idea of people getting your cookbook, the everyday Ayurveda cookbook, to use during detox, like to really use as we go into calorie restriction, to just find like a few simple things that feel right, play with the spice mixes, right? With what
Yeah.
feels right, and noticing how spices start to work in digestion, and noticing the greens, maybe even some wild greens from the yard if they have them, and starting to play with deeper mineral density. And then moving into some of the heavier recipes as they exit, that are maybe more according to their body type, as they learn about body type during the process of, because I always find like detox is a great time to learn things because you're just usually a little bit more into how your body
Mm.
feels itself and all that.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And if people are learning about constitution, you can think about the seasons. So the book is divided by seasonal recipes. You can think about the seasons as doshas, you know. So if you're like a hot type, the summer recipes are the ones that will balance that body type, you know.
Amen.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's like it's super user friendly. And there is a cream of anything soup recipe. So if people are excited about our little soup conversation right there, they can go to
Yeah.
that one. And then depending on your season or your body type or sort of what qualities you're looking for, the recipe's set up like a template. So there's like a list of veggies if you're trying to balance kapha, a list of veggies if you're trying to balance pitta, and then you throw those in with your cream end quote and spice and then blend it and you have a soup. It's so easy. Once people get into it, Kate, they get on like a rhythm with that recipe.
Awesome. And I think that's really, to me, like part of the point, right? Knowing when it's time to fast, and then knowing when it's time to eat in a way
Yeah.
that helps the body do whatever it's wanting to do. And if we don't have these periods of learning, during detoxes, if we don't have these periods of learning, then it's not there for us. We don't have that, soup recipe in our kitchen, in our head, so we don't just do it because it's something that we don't know about.
Right. No, it's such a, I love that approach to doing a detox, that it's also a time of learning. That's so true. Yeah.
Right?
It's when you like learn what you need and what nourishes you, and then, and that changes. So it's a great thing to repeat this over time, like most of us do. And then you end up like, I think it also, it re-inspires and enlivens your choices when you go
Yeah.
through the process, because you feel so enlightened by what you've learned about your body, what you've actually seen with your own eyes. It's not like you watched a video on YouTube, it's like you
Right.
saw through your own experience that your body loves this and doesn't like that. And that is like gold to have that information.
And you have the pattern in the kitchen, right? Like you have the whole
Yep.
practice of like I know how like
Totally.
the somatic learning. That's what I noticed, right? It's like those of us who have a practice on our mat, the body goes there. Like say you have a practice in the mat in the morning, right? Like the body just goes there and starts doing the thing after a while. You're not like, I think I need to do this. It just
Right. Yes.
can make soup in that way. Or even for those who are more kapha, I find broth, like broth, veggie broth. I just live on root veggie broth during those fast mimicking days, just because I need that deeper level of, I need to get to some level of deeper burn. All right, so I'm going to come on your podcast. I think we should talk about primal Ayurveda and what, because I want to talk about Ahara. I want to go back into that Ahara Rasa with Shivambu and
Mm.
with some insights and see what you've heard of. And you know what I mean? Like we can just have like an exploration of like, what do you know? What do I know? How do we combine? And how do we
Yeah.
find some answers to what we need to know next?
Primal habits.
Primal
Is that what you said?
Ayurveda.
Yeah.
Yeah. What
Yeah.
is primal Ayurveda?
Cool. I will send you the link to the calendar today. Sound
Sweet.
good?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just like, I just changed production companies, so but I think it's ready like now. Yeah.
Problem. So fun to hang out with you.
I know. It's always fun. It's always fun. I love also just envisioning all your peeps because I meet them on the road. I meet more Cate Stillman
Yeah.
people when I travel. Like they come out of the woodwork. So it's cool because there's all these little faces and they're always like so excited and so I see them when we talk.
Oh, that makes me feel really good.
Yeah. They're everywhere.
They're
They're
everywhere.
like knitted into a fabric, it's really cool.
Oh.